Hey everyone, welcome to Expert Series. My name is Jaipaul Massey-Singh, and I'm the CEO at the Brampton Board of Trade. Expert Series are conversations with thought leaders and subject matter experts around the amazing ways that they're innovating and helping businesses grow and succeed. These are really in-depth conversations that we're really lucky to have, and I'm excited for the one that we're going to have today. We're joined by Rohit Mehta, a founder of Do Good Funding, an organization that helps non-for-profits, charities, but also those in the for-profit sector attract grants, funding, and supports to help their businesses grow. Over the past 5 years alone, Do Good has helped businesses attract $20 million in funding, much of that here in our community. And I'm really excited to glean some insights from Rohit that I know will help you in what it is that you're looking to achieve, particularly in these times when revenue and capital are so hard to attract. So Rohit, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jaipaul.
And, I gave the teaser, but, what you do at Do Good is a little bit interesting. How you came to Do Good is quite interesting. And I'd love for you to share with those who are watching and listening. Tell us about you, your story, and how Do Good came to be.
Sure. So a little bit of background about me. I volunteered extensively growing up. I was a volunteer of the year at the age of 16. And something about business always spoke to me. But it wasn't until I worked for various charities and nonprofits myself that it started hitting me that, we need to approach charity and nonprofit sector work with a business mindset. So I joined the Ontario Trillium Foundation as a jury member and a grant reviewer for 5 years. And that was when folks in the community started approaching me and saying, Rohit, you should start a business, right? You have knowledge about grants and funding. You should really share this knowledge with others. And I thought, I don't know about business. And then fast forward to 2018, I went to the Brampton Entrepreneur Center. I really got a lot of support and guidance from them. And that was almost a decade ago. And ever since then, we've been able to make a huge impact for charities and nonprofits. I've learned the ups and downs of running a business, and I've been able to connect with people like yourself and other community leaders and really learn how to turn this into something effective. And so it's great to be here with you. And
I was one of those people who was lucky enough to meet you when still in the Trillium days, and you were just getting Do Good started. We've known each other for a few years, and there's been some amazing growth in what you've done because you've worked with some very small and up and coming organizations in our community, and I know you continue to do that. But along the way, you've helped some of the leading charitable organizations, not just locally, but across the province and in some cases nationally as well. Share a little bit about the types of clients, the types of success stories you've had at Do Good.
For sure. There's a lot of examples, Jaipaul. There's too many to name, but we've worked with over 100 organizations actually across the country. And the $20 million we've raised is already becoming an old stat. We've even raised more than that.
I got to up my stats. My apologies. Right? And where are we at now?
I mean, it's between 20 and 25. The data is sometimes it's hard for us to pause the consulting work we do and to do data analysis, but we have trailing, lagging data on how much money we raise. Any funder makes us wait 3 to 6 months to hear about the actual number per se. But we've been lucky to work with organizations like the Center for Social Innovation, which is the largest social innovation organization in the country. They're very well known for CSI, Spadina, and Bathurst in Toronto. We've worked with groups that do really good work here, such as Regeneration Community Outreach in Brampton. They're doing some really great work on helping marginalized communities, food insecurity. Save a Food Bank, a project of Sikh Serving Canada, is one that's very close to heart. We actually helped them expand to a third location
in Brampton.
That's right. Yep. And we helped them raise over $500,000 for their work. And so when you look at these examples, the thread that stems across them all is that organizations who are doing good work got to work with a vendor such as ourselves to have a more business mindset, to figure out how to align with the needs of institutional funders, governments, and other stakeholders. And so we were able to take what we know as experts in granting and apply that to their work to amplify. And I really feel like we're just getting started. We have so much more work to do in this space, but it's been cool to take this passion and turn it into a business.
I love it. And if you don't mind diving in a little bit deeper into the work you actually do. So you touched on the notion of consulting. You talked a little bit about, helping the development of these organizations as they go for grants and other supports. Let's dive in a little bit deeper for those who are listening in. Like, what can Do Good do for them?
Of course. So we get asked quite a bit to help with grants, loans, and subsidies, especially in the business sector, especially during COVID. We found that we were getting requests constantly. Hey, our business needs this support for either running the business day-to-day operations, purchasing equipment. We need capital financing. We need other sorts of financing, loans, wage subsidies. And so we were able to help businesses do all those things and to get those grants and loans and subsidies. The other thing that we're able to do is use our consulting knowledge, right? So I have former executive directors working for me, myself as somebody who's really been involved in the space for many years. We put our knowledge into problem solving for them, right? So there's a major arts organization in Mississauga that hired us to solve their challenges when it comes to not just funding, but to as an organization, how do they effectively bring all their programs together, and how do they effectively collaborate with funders to get them funded and to achieve their objectives and achieve their mission. So we were able to come in, myself and a colleague who leads our consulting practice, were able to come in with the knowledge and experience we have. Both of us have been involved in the arts, and we were able to give them a real step-by-step plan for 3 years to show them exactly how they get from a little bit of a space of I won't call it chaos, but to get from where they were to a space where they're organized, where their programs are well funded. And so we saw that change just in the months we worked with them, and they're in a much more stable place now as an organization. So there's that consulting aspect, but there's also things like just our grant writing service. It's a service. We charge a fair fee at an hourly rate. We don't charge a percentage fee for success, and we're able to add value to the work that businesses, including charities and nonprofits, are doing, because folks are working on the front lines, they're working in their communities, they're busy. They need someone on the back end to support them. And so we offer that support, and we work day and night to get that done. And then there's other services like our prospect research service, where we identify these opportunities. We also have a database called Do Good Grants, www.dogoodgrants.ca, which allows folks to find these opportunities. So it's this combination of grant writing and research and teaching and training that allows us to help businesses across the spectrum. And we're ready to work with anybody who needs that help.
I love it. And for those who watch these expert series, they'll know typically when we have these conversations, we start off talking about the space, the topic in a more general way, and not necessarily dive into the expert's specific business right off the jump. But you're in such an interesting niche that I thought the best way to tell your story is to talk about what Do Good does first, so people can understand the complexity of the world. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about the generic now and the broader landscape in which you operate in. So fantastic to hear the pieces. I imagine for a lot of folks, myself included, because I'm just cut that way. It's like, I can do this on my own. I certainly can fill in this generic form that I pulled off the internet. And why would I hire somebody to do this? Let's talk about, why do grant applications fail? Why do people need the insight of an expert to help them navigate this landscape?
Yeah. And I appreciate that question. And, we're at a time when AI is rapidly accelerating. It seems like every month there's a new, a new AI that's come out, a new mode, a new feature. And I've challenged myself to really go from someone who didn't like using it to someone who embraces it now and encourages people to use it to stay modern. But when you can enter an entire grant application into ChatGPT and it spits out some answers, why wouldn't you do that? Well, it's kind of like the old saying about throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if it sticks. A lot of times it doesn't, and it just creates a mess. Yeah. That's what happens when folks sometimes don't work with a professional. It can be easy to look at a few questions in a grant application and say, I know this, let me just answer them and I'll just throw it in and let's see if it gets funded. But more often than not, it doesn't, because funders are looking for very specific outcomes. They're looking for a history of success. They're looking for trust. They're looking for a track record. They're looking for making an investment, just as we would in the business world as investors, as venture capitalists. We want not only our investment to go far, but we want a return. Yeah. Well, in the charity and nonprofit sector, where we're so heavily invested, that return is impact. But that impact is only achieved if an organization is stable and they're able to achieve what they promised. And if they can demonstrate that they have the right team, the right people, the right infrastructure in place, then they can make that change and have that impact. And so when folks work with a professional like us, we help them navigate that. And I'll give you an example. Ontario Trillium Foundation, right? They have a grant called the SEED grant. The SEED grant is $10,000 to $100,000 to test, pilot, or research an idea, program, or initiative. We got 50 requests to write that grant. Do you know how many people actually ended up submitting?
I'm going to guess of that 50, I'm going to say 10. Let's go with 20%.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So about 10 of them,
There you go. Nailed it.
they actually ended up. And the reason why, in some cases, we had to convince people not to apply.
Right.
We had to say, the work you're doing and the work that this funder is trying to fund is not aligned. It is not a good fit. Let's put your energy elsewhere. In other cases, they couldn't get the mandatory documentation together. And there was one case in particular where somebody really wanted to just submit the grant without the documentation. And we knew that no matter how good the grant was, it would be declined.
Right.
So we didn't even say, pay us for our services and let's submit a grant that's going to get declined. We would never do that, right? And so I think that working with a professional is about navigating, and it's about working with folks who know funders. We know funders, we know how they think. We are on calls with funders all the time, and these institutions are very similar to folks who invest in the business world. It's very similar to, say, what a bank loan officer would know. All that knowledge is what we have in our wheelhouse, and that's why more often than not, we are not only successful in grants, but we're also able to guide people to the opportunities that will lead to success. And if we don't think there's a chance of success, we guide them away.
Right. And that's so valuable, right? Like so much of the, I think people forget sometimes that engaging an expert in any field of endeavor is not just how do we do the thing that we want to do, but sometimes it's here's how not to do it, or quite frankly, here's why you shouldn't do it at all. Yeah. And people don't always necessarily see the value in that, but it can save you so much time and energy.
That's it. And the key word is time, because executive directors, even small business owners, are busy. Yeah. They don't have time. They are stressed. And so the seed that was planted for this business was when I saw executive directors burning out. I remember I was a teenager and I would look around and I would say, why are so many leaders in our sector burning out? And I said, they don't have enough time because they're spending so much time writing grant proposals, chasing them, and sometimes spending a lot of time on figuring out, is this grant even for me? That of course they can't do the work that they want to do in the community and in the front lines when they're so bogged down. And so by us adding that capacity, we're able to free people up to do the good work that they're meant to do, hence the name Do Good.
I see how it all comes together. Now, first off, the thing we just have to stop and pause for a second. The fact that you're having these insights as a teenager, when I was like, where can I get comic books from? Or like, my part-time job after school, you definitely got some deep insights early. So building on this idea now of where it's coming from, this more strategic piece, the observations that drove this. One of the things that you and I have talked about offline in the past, when you've talked about to talk to me in my board of trade role about grant opportunities and so forth, is this notion of a grant strategy that, as you touched on, I might not be ready organizationally for a grant today for any number of reasons, but it doesn't mean I'm never going to be ready for that grant. And I think this is a really interesting idea that you had posited in my brain that stuck with me is it's not just about the immediate opportunity, it's how I'm building my organization's capacity for grants and bursaries and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I talk to clients about grant strategy, we always start with a budget. And what I say to folks is, okay, you're interested in applying for this grant. Let's see the budget and let's see what you're actually planning on spending money on. When are you planning to spend that money? How much do you need? Because that's going to show me that you and your board have taken time to really think about what it is that you need and why you need it and how you're going to roll that out, right? The most successful organizations and nonprofit and charitable businesses that apply for grants through us are the ones that come to us and say, here's what we need, here's when we're doing it, this is our plan, and we look at it and we say, okay, that makes sense. We can get going with this, right? But sometimes you have folks who approach us and say, we'd like $1 million. And I say, okay, well, how are you going to be using this investment? And they say, well, we're going to fight poverty, or we're gonna try to solve hunger. And it's like, we have to take an approach, the same approach that we use in business, right? We have to take that approach and bring it to the charity and nonprofit sector. And I think that organizations that are winning all the grants are the ones that have strategic thinking. They're the ones with people like yourselves on the board of directors. You're a very strategic thinker. I've observed this about you, and I think that more of us need that business thinking, that business mindset. And then what's going to happen is you're going to experience growth, almost like the steps on a ladder. So you'll get that first 10, 20, $30,000 grant, and you'll be able to demonstrate to funders, we set out this strategic objective.
Yeah.
We're going to help this many young people at this breakfast program, for instance, in this school in Brampton. And once you achieve that, it's like, oh, fantastic. Your organization helped achieve this objective. You had an impact on hunger in this specific geography for this number of students. Now we're going to give you a grant to go bigger. And maybe you go with a certain neighborhood in Brampton. Maybe you're helping Bramalea now. And then maybe a year later, you're able to demonstrate to a funder like the Community Foundation that you've done amazing work. And now they want to give you money for all of Brampton.
Right.
And we've worked with organizations and we've seen them grow slow and steady in this way. But I think it starts with having a clear mission that you're going to achieve in 5 years. And it starts with having a clear series of steps that you're going to take and then putting dollar figures next to that.
And I appreciate those pieces. And I imagine the piece that we haven't called out by name, but is baked into that, is that of data. And how's information being captured along the way? Not just after I've gotten the grant and the outcome measures, but again, building my organization's capacity to qualify for funding. Can we talk a little bit about data collection? And is that something that organizations need to be focusing on more, in your opinion?
100%. Like in this world where impact, every organization wants to have impact, even business owners want impact. We need to think about how are we measuring that impact. And I'll give you an example, the Ontario Trillium Foundation Grow Grant. So I get asked about this all the time, right? Rohit, you were involved with Trillium. Tell us about this big grant. And I tell people the key to winning this grant, it's up to $200,000 per year for up to 6 years. It's a lot of money. The key to winning that grant is to have data, and not just any data, but you need clear evaluation data, clear metrics. I was literally having a conversation with a client of ours this morning. They do work with seniors in Northern Ontario, and they're interested in this Grow grant. And I said to them, you need to have clear statistics, data, and research that provides evidence that proves without doubt that the work that you're doing is impactful. And we're not just going to take your word for it.
Right.
You have to prove it. You have to demonstrate that. And people say, okay, well, I did a survey. All right. I surveyed some of our clients.
Sure.
Is that enough? Well, no, it's not. Ideally, you want a third party to evaluate your work.
Yeah.
Just like we do in business, we have audits, right? So the charity and nonprofit sector also needs to think this way. And by having audits, you can win that Grow grant. You can come forward and say, there's this really successful model that's been done, let's say outside of the community. Here's the statistics and data that prove that this model is effective. Now give us money and, look at our track record. We're trustworthy, we're reliable. Allow us to now bring in this model and do this work. Or organizations will say, we ourselves have been successful. We now want to duplicate this in other parts of Ontario, right?
That scalability piece. No, that's a brilliant way of thinking about it. And then, oh my gosh, I had a question there for a second on the data piece, and then I lost it for a sec, but we'll come back to it. In the interim, one of the things that you did talk about is you've talked about the different types of opportunities that are out there. And you mentioned in passing some of the work you've done historically around funds that were available during COVID and other pieces there. So what we're touching on here is that these grants are not exclusively for charities and not-for-profits. And I just want to emphasize that to the people who are listening in, because many of our members are not charities nor non-for-profits. Let's talk a little bit about what's out there for those who are in the for-profit sector. What types of work can they be doing?
Of course. And I want to preface by saying that us as business owners, and I'm a business owner myself, we struggle to get grants because very often the money does come from government. And so I find that the government doesn't always want to give large sums of money to individual entrepreneurs because we stand to profit from that. So they don't want to take public dollars and demonstrate, I guess, invest and then lead to private profit. So that is one of the observations I've made, because I've said to myself, well, I'm an expert in grants. Why aren't I getting a ton of grants? There are not a ton of grants.
Right.
However, if you look at where investment does come in for business owners such as ourselves, investing in outcomes is very prevalent. So for instance, let's say I'm creating more jobs. Let's say I'm creating more jobs for young people or Ontarians with disabilities, or if I'm creating more employment in a specific sector. There's subsidies for that, wage subsidies. Employment Ontario wage subsidies are a fantastic one, which we've taken advantage of. And what they allow is businesses that are meeting the objectives that the government has set out, they will receive a reward in the form of more subsidies.
Right.
So they have a bit of a formula. I believe we hired a young person under the age of 30. We received a wage subsidy. Don't quote me. It could have been $11 to $13 per hour for up to 30 hours per week, which was incredible.
Huge.
And when we got those checks, I was like surprised that, we were doing something that we would have done anyway. We would have hired a young person anyway.
Yeah.
We would have focused on intensive training anyway. And here we were being complimented by receiving, subsidy dollars, which you didn't have to return.
Yeah.
Loans are another fantastic way that businesses can benefit from support. So we've been lucky to receive support from BDC in partnership with Alterna Savings, a great credit union, which we love working with, that has a presence in Brampton. And what's nice about that instrument is that you can buy yourself time as a business owner. And if you get that financing, especially if you get it at a great rate, as interest rates have been relatively low, you can grow your impact as a business, and you can do it without having to risk all your own personal capital.
Right.
So when I was in my first year of business, I realized that I'm not going to make any money in the first few months.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to approach Alterna. They gave me a microcredit loan as an entrepreneur. And that $10,000 loan bought me a few months of time. So I did hire a part-time assistant at the time, and I was able to relax and not have to stress about being able to make money, because I knew that if we really focused on making an impact, we would generate revenue. And so I find these instruments, once again, loans, subsidies, and the occasional grants that are available to us, they can have a huge impact. There's a grant coming up with the province of Ontario. It's called the RAISE grant, like RAISE, for diverse and multicultural entrepreneurs. They're funding a lot of different aspects of small business owners' work. And so when these opportunities come, go for it. Jump on that opportunity and take it. And then, turn to folks like us who can help navigate that world.
Amazing. And then, so you touched on something here I think is really critical. And we see it, among our businesses very much right now. And that is the nature of, right now we're in a tariff situation, right? The trade situation that we find ourselves in as Canadians is very, very challenging. And the various levels of government, provincially and federally, have put forward some interesting programs. And I think many who are well suited to support productivity and competitiveness for Canadian businesses, particularly as we look to pivot, to international markets. So there's lots of money out there if you want to attend a trade show, or even fund a trade delegation to another market. There's funding out there if you want to buy a piece of equipment in order to be more competitive. And there's a bunch of pieces out there, all of which are fantastic. But the challenge is as we raise our advocacy to various levels of government, is that those dollars don't reap immediate benefit. I can go to a trade show tomorrow, but the cycle for me to meet a customer, a client, that onboard that customer and serve them, maybe 6 to 8 months a year. To buy a piece of equipment, have it brought here, commissioned, trained, set up, producing whatever it is it needs to produce, maybe a year or more.
Right.
And businesses are going through crunches right now. My experience has been with a lot of, I'm going somewhere with this, a lot of the grants and opportunities that are out there fund these types of expenses. They're capital expenses, they're program expenses. But where businesses and non-for-profits struggle is operating expenses. We just need help on payroll week to week right now. We need to just hire a body to support the overall operations of the organization. Can you talk about, are there sources of fund and grant out there that can help businesses in these transitional times? You talked about wage subsidy, that's one, but that's one of the few as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and I believe it is a huge challenge. Like whether you're in the for-profit space or the nonprofit charitable space, everybody says, Rohit, I need operational money. And it's like, yes, we all need it. And I think revenue diversification in this market is the way to go. Whether you're running an organization that's doing good work or whether you're running a small business, if you can come up with unique ways to generate revenue, not to toot our own horn, but I did realize that people really need information, and people came up to us for years and said, Rohit, where can I go for cheap information on grants? There's nothing cheap. It's so expensive. After a while, it's, we thought about it as a team, and we decided, okay, let's just hire somebody. Let's build something. So we built a database. Today, we do receive some reoccurring revenue from that investment. And even though it's a product that we're constantly improving and we're putting energy into it, sometimes a one-time injunction of funds into your business to create a service or, again, a new stream of revenue, it can then guarantee consistent money to come in to sustain operations. And for that, you can go to any bank.
Sure.
Any bank, within Brampton or beyond, a loan officer, a banking officer can help you find access to those. And maybe you're a diverse entrepreneur. Maybe you belong to the Black community. Maybe you belong to another community. There are specific grants and supports available for entrepreneurs. There are grants available to newcomers. There's grants available to women. There's grants available to young people. But a lot of times navigating it can be very, very complex. So we've built a database where we try and feature a number of these opportunities. And you can also go to your local entrepreneur center. Brampton Entrepreneur Center has been a fantastic resource. But at the end of the day, are we facing challenges with getting operating funds? Are we facing challenges, in the for-profit and nonprofit sector? Yes, across the board. And a number of organizations have closed their doors even since COVID as a result of that. But hopefully in their place, new ones are going to come up.
And you talked a little bit about, there are some grants out there that address the needs of specific populations, whether it be marginalized or other priorities that the grantor is looking to support. That's one way in for some. How does partnership unlock other opportunities as well? I may be a small organization, or I may not be able to deliver on the entirety of what the grant is intended for. Does partnership enhance my grant application? Is looking for others to go in with? Is that a strategy that could work?
I mean, I always encourage folks to look to what else is happening in the community and to not work in isolation. So, let's say you're in the food security space. Spend some time mapping who else is in this space, who else is doing good work here, and make sure that you're working together with them. If you're starting a new project or you're going in a new direction, consult with those folks and see if you can combine your resources, right? Because you're way more likely to be successful. In those cases, if you are partnering, I always say to build that relationship early. Don't just contact someone to ask for a letter of support 2 days before.
You mean like I'm getting this week for SDF applications going next week?
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Skills Development Fund. We were just working on it and we're working with a client's grant. And I remember realizing that folks who have partnerships in place, who have the letters of support in place, they're going to be more successful. But you can't get that a few days before a grant. You need to build the partnerships now for 2026.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. No, and I totally get it. And I remember that the thought that I lost for a second came back to me, and you refreshed it here, is this idea too that, when talking about a grant strategy and talking about all the aspects that you're discussing, what in my mind makes it feel important is, the conversation I have sometimes with our business members when they're talking about client acquisition, or when I'm talking to individuals when they talk about, applying for a job. You may fit all the criteria. You may on paper be checking every box. But it's not binary. They're not looking at, do you check the box? You're in a competition with everybody else who's also going in. So it's not simply enough to say, I fulfill all the criteria. You have to think about how I'm a more attractive entity, in this case, in terms of my capacity to deliver upon impact than everyone else who's applying for that same grant. So the stakes are much higher, I think, than some realize, where they say, I fulfill the application. It's not about the application. It's really about your capacity to deliver in a really competitive environment of individuals who are looking for these resources.
That's it. And competition is the key word there, because we're in an environment where, 10 years ago, if somebody wrote a grant, maybe there's a ton of errors in there, they weren't really answering the question, okay, their grant would get declined. Today, the expectation is that most people can run that narrative through an AI, and at least the text is going to be
on paper, everyone's going to look great.
Everyone's going to look great. So then what makes folks stand out? How can they be competitive? Well, in the charity nonprofit sector, it's about who's got a track record of success and has a huge potential to make an impact. In the for-profit space, it's again about who's demonstrated sales. They've demonstrated stability in their business. They've demonstrated that they do things in a way that contributes to the economy and contributes to growth. But are they going to be able to continue to stimulate that, to keep jobs and to keep them locally? Are they going to be able to grow the operations and contribute to the local economy and keep dollars here in this community? That's what institutions look at. And if you are creating jobs, if you are, let's say, giving priority populations opportunity, let's say you're hiring a lot of young people, or you're training, or you're upskilling, or you're helping enable the trades, you're going to be seen as more desirable. Right.
And there's a perception along that line for some that it's also not enough simply to have the application in, that there is a certain amount of relationship building, influencing, and basically getting in front decision makers. We touched on the SDF application piece, for instance. There's a perception among many in the community when applying for this funding, it's not simply enough to put in a great application, have some good partners and letters of support, that you need to be in the ear of your local MPP or whomever it is to help influence that decision. Is that a reality right now, or is that something you endorse, or is that just some do it, but it's a perception more than a reality?
Right. I think in this part of Canada, it helps to play nice with your political leaders. And we always try to maintain great relationships with everybody who leads, whether it's at a municipal, provincial, or federal level, because those relationships can actually lead to success. And I should remind you that our sector is able to very heavily not just have an impact on Canadians, but it has a huge impact on the economy. 8.4% of our GDP is actually made up of what we call the third sector. That's massive, right? And so when our political leaders are engaged in the work that we're doing, not only are they happy because they know that we're having a huge impact, but your proposals are more likely to be successful. We actually ran into an issue. We were applying for New Horizons for seniors, a federal grant.
Yeah.
And for some reason, our client just couldn't get a letter of support. Like, there were all sorts of challenges. So one of my colleagues said, it does say that we can get a letter of support from the MP. Let's find out if they have a relationship. Well, guess what? They did. And this individual was actually out of the country. So on their behalf, we called the MP. We reminded them that they have a relationship and that the work that this organization was doing was so critical to that community. And within hours, they provided a letter of support, and we were able to submit a day early. And they'll probably get that grant because the grant was fantastic. But the mandatory piece was, did they build a relationship with somebody who could provide that support? Well, yes, they built a relationship with the right person, which is a federal MP for a federal grant.
Yeah,
relationships do make a difference.
But what I'm hearing is they make a difference, and in some cases, like you said, play nice with everybody because you never know who can help you. Yeah. But it really comes back. What I'm hearing is this sort of core idea that you've established right from the beginning, and that is, are you demonstrating organizational readiness? And so what I'm hearing is that relationship, that letter from the MP or the MPP may have some sway because it's an individual of influence, but what it's really saying is this is an organization that is embedded in the community and is a known entity and therefore potentially trustworthy.
Definitely trustworthy, right? Because I think we've all encountered scams lately and things that put our ears up, so to speak. And if an organization is doing work that is either unethical or it's not trustworthy, they're not going to get the support of any level of politics, right?
That makes sense. And then when you talk about that credibility piece, I know one of the things that you shared with me is that increasingly, again, to bring back the analogy of almost like hiring, I guess, that the social media and digital presence of an organization is increasingly becoming something that grantors are looking at. Oh, yeah. So do I need to go and scrub my Instagram or my LinkedIn or something like that before I put in a grant application?
I personally think about this all the time. I think, I'm outspoken and I say, are any of these ideas going to make me lose an opportunity or lose a client, right? So I would say be apolitical.
Yeah.
Be apolitical. You can put out messages as an organization, as a charity or nonprofit, but it shouldn't be political. You shouldn't be swaying towards one political party or another. Show that you welcome everybody. Right. And if you're going to give opportunities to, let's say, political leaders to speak at your events, give all political leaders opportunities. Try to show neutrality in that sense, because as we've seen just over the last few years, look at how there's been a swing between the parties in power, and look at how relationships can play a huge role. Right. Somebody is a counselor today and then they're premier tomorrow. And that is interesting, because it goes to show that if you put out your best foot and you build relationships and you do government relations, that can actually work in your favor in the future, because the folks who are up and coming leaders today are going to be the decision makers of tomorrow, and you want your organization or your business to shine in a good light, right? Of course,
that makes complete sense. So as we hopefully through this conversation, you're getting more people interested in the notion granting is an approach that they can take to revenue diversification, that there's an opportunity, if they think about it in a strategic and practical way, to not only be successful in the short term, but set themselves up for real success long-term. When you think about, you've mentioned yourself, hundreds of organizations, millions of dollars raised. Are there some commonalities that you've seen beyond those that we've already touched upon? Some of the most successful grant applications, maybe some of the grant applications that surprised you that they were successful, where you can look back and say, this is some of the X factor stuff that we should be thinking about as well.
Yeah, I think folks who take time to actually work for organizations on salary and dedicate themselves fully, that is one of the core pieces. That when you have, let's say, an executive director or a CEO that's leading an organization and they're leading a team and they're paying people right, that can make a huge impact right away, right? Because we get a lot of calls from folks who just started yesterday or sort of running an organization on the side of their desk. Very often they can be limited in terms of resources. Funders don't look at them eye to eye. You want funding from one of the top 50 institutions in Canada, you should have an executive director.
Right.
You should have a strong presence. I think that's so important. And
does having a board matter therefore as well?
100%.
Yeah.
And of course it is a requirement.
If you're a non-for-profit, of course.
Exactly,
Yes.
Right? So you have to have your minimum 3 board members. But I chat with folks, and Jaipaul, the number one thing they say is, my board doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
I hear that way too often. And so the advice I give folks is get your insurance provider, your banker, your grocery store, your jeweler, get these people engaged with the organization. Don't get your friends and family too involved. It's not recommended. But if you get folks who are maybe one step, maybe they're an acquaintance, they're a vendor, they're someone you do business with. If you get them on your board, you're going to strengthen that organization. You're going to bring together the expertise so that when you're asked by a funder, and they do ask, who is on your board, tell us about the connections they have, tell us about their credentials, tell us about where they work. That just makes your organization look good.
It's all stable. Credibility.
Absolutely.
So again, I think we've probably got some people intrigued now. Where do people start? What's your kickoff point? Say, like, if I want to get into this, I need to understand the landscape. I think, we're an organization that does good work. We measure it. We can demonstrate it. I just don't know what grants to apply for. I don't even know where to begin. What advice would you give that individual organization?
Yeah, so I think it's so important to start by doing a search and by looking at what opportunities exist that are coming up in the short term. We're very deadline driven in our company. And so when we know that there's a grant like the New Horizons for Seniors grant that I mentioned, or an Ontario Trillium Grow, we try and work towards those deadlines. Now, if you don't know where to look for that,
sure.
www.dogoodgrants.ca.
Look at that, you said the solutions are right there.
And it's offered at a great rate. It's a very low rate to access the portal. We did that on purpose to make it accessible. Brampton Board of Trade has a lot of resources. I know that your network is a good one, and so I encourage folks to become a member.
Thank
if they
you.
Haven't.
Appreciate that.
I just became a member myself. And Brampton Entrepreneur Center, I really have to say that Prince Khan and the team over there have been absolutely instrumental. Like, I wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for them. And so I think that relationship is really important. And again, I do want to give a shout out to Alterna Savings. They've been with us from day one. And I talk about them. I bank with them personally, professionally. They've been a fantastic supporter of our work at Do Good. And the reason I bring them up is because they do help fund entrepreneurs. They do have loans for entrepreneurs who are diverse, and the financing we've gotten to help us through challenges has kept my business afloat, and I think it can help a lot of other business owners. Amazing. And I love that you took the time to recognize that. Thank you for the Board of Trade piece, but more importantly, that it really is a team effort. All these things we talk about are not doable on our own. It takes experts, it takes people who are like-minded, it takes people with the relationships to help make that happen. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about some of the work that Do Good is doing in general. You mentioned Alterna, for instance. I met your colleagues from Alterna a couple of weeks ago at this fantastic conference that you put together. And I'd love for people to understand what it is you do beyond just the core. Talk about the conference, talk about the types of thought leadership that you're trying to bring to the community. Of course. So we organized our Do Good retreat and conference that took place earlier this season. And we brought together funders, folks who were really leading and making an impact in the charity and nonprofit sector, and then those institutions who are helping to make that possible, service providers as well, who all came together and really talked about how can we make more of an impact, how can we grow this sector, the social good sector, and how can we learn from each other and learn from funders and businesses and service providers. So we want to do more of that. We're going to be convening in Brampton next year in partnership, hopefully, with the Brampton Board of Trade. I'm really convinced that this is the place where we want to do business. And so we're going to be doing more convening. You'll be seeing me at the Entrepreneur Center. I'm just going to be spending more time there, meeting with entrepreneurs and talking to them about how they can grow their social impact businesses. And we're on a mission. I will say it today. We'd love to have more institutional funders funding our capacity building work, because we are a capacity building institution. So in the future, I do plan to offer more workshops, more training, and more events in partnership with great organizations like yourselves to really teach and train entrepreneurs, business owners, sector leaders on how they can make more of an impact, but do it with a business mindset. So, watch out on our socials and on our website for more opportunities, especially in the new year. We're really shifting to that. And I think the big highlight will be putting on an event right here in Brampton with your organization.
No, it's fantastic. And I think you did a lot to talk about that event, and it was great. One of the things I think people need to also understand, because it was such a great showcase of this, is that in addition to all the practicalities, and you had some great organizations talk about their journey, both from attracting funding, but the work that they were doing. But you had some incredible speakers that came out and were able to share the work that they were doing in the community. And, I think we already talked about, this approach, this topic is for businesses who are non-for-profits, for-profit, everybody can benefit from this. But recognizing that, this is a lot of the support for those who are in the non-for-profit and charitable sector. You do so much, I think, to help share those important stories that are necessary to inspire people to keep doing good work. And I think, in addition to everything you're doing to support these organizations day in, day out with their funding needs, the thing that we cannot get enough of in this community are people who are creating stages and spaces for good news to be shared and for inspiration to be drawn. And I just think it's really fantastic if people, are looking for that. You are a never-ending source of, let me tell you about, or let me tell you this person I met, or let me tell you about this organization we helped. Not taking the credit for what Do Good did to help them, but for the incredible work they're doing in the community. I just want to make sure that, if people are looking for a good reason to get involved with you, if nothing else, come and get inspired by the many organizations that you've been able to touch and help do amazing work in Brampton, in the GTA, and across the country as well.
Appreciate that, Jaipaul.
Yeah, and then so as just a final thought then, anything we didn't touch on, anything that you want to share, how do people find you, most importantly? Because I trust we've inspired some folks to reach out to Do Good today.
Right on. So it's www.dogoodfunding.ca, also at Do Good Fund across all channels. And I really want to thank the listeners at the Board of Trade, my fellow members who are listening to this podcast and being here. And I will be at more of the events. And so I look forward to connecting in person. I encourage folks to come out and network with each other. This is how we build a strong network and a strong community. And I think boards of trade play a really important role, and we need to look to them as the charity and nonprofit sector, but also the social good sector. We need to come together in that way. And by doing so, we're actually going to elevate the work we do, and we're going to really make it seen as more important, because I think this is the most important work, the social good work that we do. Absolutely.
And I think in communities like ours, where there's not as strong a civic institutional framework as there are in other larger metropolitan cities. I mean, Brampton, a population of 1 million people, but in some ways we're still growing in these ways. Organizations like ours, or organizations like yours, I think play an outsized role as we're building the capacity of others. And I hope in a few years, we're able to look back and say, oh yeah, there's lots of people doing this work now. And maybe not as much as on the shoulders of organizations like the ones that we're part of. But in the meantime, I think it's the work that's worth doing. And I appreciate you making the time today to talk about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you and your audience and for giving me the opportunity.
100%. Thank you most of all for joining us. Thank you to Rohit, but thank you most of all for you for tuning in and listening and learning about not just what Do Good funding is doing, but more specifically, how you can scale up your organization, become more impactful in the work that our community needs. But most importantly, make sure that you can continue doing the great work that you're about through accessing resources that are available through funds, grants, bursaries, and otherwise that organizations like Do Good can help you connect with. So please, we hope you inspired you. Please continue to tune in to our expert series. But most of all, just thank you for your ongoing support for the Brampton Board of Trade and our great members like Rohit and Do Good. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.